I'm excited to bring you a short mead. That's a mead with a lower alcohol content, and it doesn't take 2 years to be drinkable. It takes maybe 2 to 4 weeks is all. Now the last time I made this mead, it was really good in 1 month. I did just 4 weeks. We start out with honey, of course. I've got 1 quart of honey, and I heated this honey in the microwave for about a minute, minute and a half, just to warm it so that it flows nicely. Here it goes into the fermentation container, and I sanitized the fermentation container. Now warm water and the warm honey can mix quite well together, quite easily. I just filled the bucket to about right here because I want to make sure that that honey and water mix together. So I'm going to swirl it and just make sure that we're getting a good mix. Teaspoon of dried orange peel and a teaspoon of dried lemon peel. And there we are. $25 raisins going in. I'm going to count out 25 raisins. 1, 2, 25. Yeah, that's probably good. Now we've got tea here. This is black decaffeinated tea. It's been steeping for a while. I'm going to dump the tea in. The tea and the raisins add tannins. If you read that raisins add yeast nutrient, not so much. It's tannins that it adds, and some flavors from the raisins and from the tea as well, I'm sure. But it's mostly tannins that it adds, and it gives it a different mouthfeel and flavor as well. Now I can use my spoon to stir. You know, that honey feels thick there on the bottom. So I'm just going to stir until I don't feel that resistance on my spoon at the bottom of the jug anymore. And that's why I heat the honey, so that it does mix more easily with the water. All right, I'm doing zigzags with the spoon at the bottom of the fermentation container here, and I feel no resistance from honey anymore. So that tells me that the honey and water are all mixed together. We call this the must. When the honey and water and ingredients all mix together in mead making, we call this a must. Now I've got Fleischmann's active dry bread yeast here. It's the original, and I'm going to pour in the whole packet. This is not the type of yeast I usually use for mead making, but in this case, we're breaking a few other rules too about traditional mead making. Bread yeast is a nice yeast for a kit for beginning mead making, or for making a short mead, or a quick mead, a quicker mead. The bread yeast usually starts to ferment within hours. So it's pretty amazing how quickly it starts fermenting usually. Now I'm stirring again because I want everything to mix well, plus I'm adding air into the must. I'm adding oxygen. And oxygen is important in the mead making process for the first few days or so. After fermentation gets going nicely, we no longer want oxygen added to the must, because then it does harm. But for now, it's good. It's a good thing. So that's why I'm stirring rather vigorously. I go one way around and then the other way around, because that just mixes in air like crazy. I'm going to get some more water to add directly. Now that everything's mixed together, the honey and water are mixed, I do not need to heat the next water that I put in. I can just add cold water, for me, right from my well water, from my faucet. Many people don't have good well water. It's best not to use a city water source because it has possibly chlorine in it, and that can negatively impact the fermentation process. So it's best to buy some spring water or use a good tasting well water, which is what I have, very sweet well water. This is a 6-quart fermentation bucket. So I'm adding about to the gallon mark. I think that's good enough. I'm going to give it one more good stir. Get everything mixed in there nicely. Can you see what it looks like a little bit? This is the lid. It's got a grommet right there in the hole that I cut in the pail. I put a rubber grommet in there. That's where I'll put the airlock. Airlock right here. Add a little water. Right about to the halfway, or a little less than halfway ideally. And we'll push that down in there gently so that we don't crack the lid. Put the lid on the airlock. We're done. That's it. And now we wait for the magic to happen. I suspect that within hours, this will be bubbling. This will be bubbling. But sometimes we don't see it in the airlock, the fermentation bubbling. If there's leaking of air around the lid or around the grommet, where that is, then it doesn't show up here as much. We'll see in a little bit how we're doing. So thank you for watching. That's a very simple mead, and in about 2 weeks, I'll put this thing in the refrigerator. If it was cold weather outside, I'd put it out on the screen porch table, and that would cold crash it, and it would make the fermentation process stop and allow the yeast and other things to flocculate down to the bottom. Then I would pour it off that yeast cake at the bottom of the fermentation bucket into some sort of container, probably bottles, which I would put directly into the refrigerator or leave out in the cold. Last winter, I put them in the swing top lid bottles, put them in the garage, and just left them out there because they were nice and cold. Whenever I wanted to have a drink of one of those bottles, I just took it out of the cold garage, and it worked out beautifully. It was a really good mead. But that was 1 month after I started it, like 1 month from today. I have a class in just a few weeks, and I'm hoping to use this mead as a taste tester so that people can taste the kind of mead that they're making with the kit that we provide. See everybody. Thanks again.